In fact, the high Australian dollar and what to do about it is one of the main topics for the government's economic forum in Brisbane. The other being Asia, with Wayne Swan declaring tonight that Australia should be striving to be an engine of the Asian century, not just a passenger in it. So business finds itself at yet another gathering with government, but will this one deliver anything at all? I caught up with Innes Willox, Chief Executive of Australian Industry Group, to find out. Innes Willox, welcome to the programme.
Hi Tiki, how are you?
Now, your own survey, the Australian PMI showed manufacturing performance at its lowest level since September last year. Is that a strong message that you've taken to the forum today?
Absolutely. There are clear signs that big parts of the Australian economy are under stress and perhaps increasing stress. We've had contractions in our surveys around manufacturing, services and construction over the past few months. And there aren't real signs that that growth that we had from the March quarter, GDP growth, is really flowing through to the broader economy. And that's a significant problem that we have. Our lopsided economy is perhaps becoming even more lopsided.
Big focus on the Australian dollar today. Is there anything that can be done about a strong Australian dollar?
The dollar is a big issue. It's the big issue. It's the number one with a bullet issue for our members when they talk about what is making their competitive ability, what is impacting on their competitive ability. The government can do a lot around the dollar to ease burdens on business, the costs on business, compliance costs, regulatory costs and the like. They can reduce the corporate tax rate. All of these things are important to making Australian business more competitive.
We've had the Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force, the Business Advisory Forum, the Small Business Forum and now the Economic Forum. But in terms of action, where are the policy outcomes?
Look, it's true we've had a lot of talking over the past few months. There's no doubt about that in those forums that you've mentioned. And the PM's Manufacturing Task Force is still a work in progress, for instance, and we hope to have some clear policy outcomes from that in about 6 weeks or 2 months. But we're now really getting to the point where the rubber does need to hit the road, and we do need to see some concrete action from government to help redress some of these imbalances within the economy.
What do you need to see from government for that to happen? Because government has been very successful in saying to business, we'll keep talking to you, we'll keep talking to you. But when it's actually come to opportunities for them to do something like tax reform in the last budget, they simply haven't done it.
Look, that tax reform issue in the last budget was deeply disappointing, and we've made that clear to government. And since then, we did get a commitment from this government to longer-term business tax reform, and we welcome that. But we do need to see some action. Where are we at as a country in terms of our competitiveness, our ability to compete against our Asian competition and against our Asian trading partners? This is meant to be the Asian century. We're about to get the Henry White paper on the Asian century. So how do we set ourselves up for that? What do we need to do to position ourselves? So let's look at the area of skills, for instance. We have 40% of our workforce has no post-secondary school qualifications. Our vocational education and training system is really not as effective as it could be. It's not as responsive to industry's needs as it could be.
One government reform was in state-federal legislation, and the last great COAG outcome was in environmental streamlining. But here we have at the first offence this spitting row between Tony Burke and the Queensland government over the Alpha Coal project.
Yeah, and that doesn't augur well. I think the intentions there are good and honourable, and we certainly welcome them. I mean, the attempt to reduce duplication when it comes to green and red tape is more than welcome, but now we're getting into internecine government warfare over this issue, which doesn't augur well for the future, and we hope that that could be resolved as quickly as possible.
Industry is craving certainty on industrial relations. There are wage increases even as your PMI goes down, and plenty of unions, of course, in attendance today. The government doesn't want to budge, I don't think, on key reforms to do with management flexibility. What can you do for your members on this?
We can point to over 100 different examples of where union rights have increased under the Fair Work Act, and you'd be very hard-pressed to find one where employer rights have increased. Look, there are a range of areas you could go into: what's happened with allowable matters, what's happening with scope orders, and what's happening with greenfield sites and transmission of business. These are key areas that go to our national productivity and the ability for business to invest.
We're days away, of course, from a carbon tax. What are your members telling you?
business is about to be hit with a carbon price of $23 a tonne. You look at the European price, it's about $8 or $9 a tonne, and the international price through the UN is at about $5 a tonne. What business is looking at is how will the impact of the carbon tax flow down through the production process? How will costs be passed on? How will they be able to adapt to these increased costs? What will it do to energy costs? These are big unknowns for specific businesses that they're trying to address. There are some support mechanisms there from government which are most welcome, but for a lot of business they won't be in a position to accept or get that support, and that's of concern to their general competitive situation.
Innes Willox, let's hope these 2 days are a little productive. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiggy.